Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you are a returning listener, it is great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, we're glad you joined us and we hope you like what you hear. So, our podcast is for people that want to learn something new or make themselves a little bit better every day. We focus on personal accountability, being left brained, using the facts, removing emotion to make decisions, showing leadership interactions with people in the world, and really taking control of our lives to build the lives that we want for ourselves. So we'll cover a wide range of topics, but we tend to focus on how those parameters can impact us positively, regardless of what aspect of life we're talking about: personal, professional, emotional. It kind of paints across all the areas of your life. So, with that said, today's episode, we are talking about the fact that there's no guarantees. And this comes from a conversation that we were having with a person a few weeks ago. And they were kind of talking about, it'd be great if it was guaranteed. Well, yeah, it would be great if it was guaranteed, but absolutely nothing in life is guaranteed other than at some point your life will come to an end. That's the one guarantee you'll get in life, is at some point the clock runs out on all of us. So what we wanted to do was take some different circumstances, different situations, and kind of illustrate that regardless of what the situation is, how good things look, how rosy things are, or how bad they are, how negative they are, you don't know what's going to happen. You just don't know how things are going to play out. And so you should be prepared to deal with the good and the bad that comes into your life and have coping mechanisms in place so that when good things happen, you can appreciate and enjoy them and be grateful for them. And when bad things happen, that you can deal with them, that you can learn the lessons you need to learn from them and apply those learnings to future situations in your life. So that's what we're here to talk about today. The life offers zero guarantees. So we did an episode called "The World Doesn't Owe You a Thing," which is true. But I think this is kind of a corollary to that episode, that there's no guarantees in life. There's no guarantee that good things are going to happen. There's no guarantee that bad things are going to happen. And so we're going to cover some different circumstances, some different examples of what that looks like. So our first example, and we talked about this in a previous episode, how Netflix took over. That started as the home entertainment industry when Blockbuster was kind of the market giant. So Blockbuster, for those that are of a certain age, we all remember there was a Blockbuster, kind of like Starbucks, on every corner. And you would go to Blockbuster. It started off as VHS tapes, video cassettes, and then morphed into DVDs that you would go and rent from Blockbuster. Well, as the go all the way back to VHS tapes, and that was crazy because, like, even if you returned the VHS tape, if you returned it late, there was a fee. If you returned it not rewound, sometimes they would charge you a fee. And obviously, no rewinding went away when it transitioned over to DVDs, but they had kind of a chokehold on the home entertainment market. So if you wanted to go rent a movie, or if you wanted to see a movie in your house, you went to Blockbuster to do it in general. There were some mom and pops, and we always frequented mom and pops in whatever town we lived in because we tried to support local businesses. We also used Blockbuster as well, but they dominated that market. And Netflix was actually started by the idea for Netflix was generated by someone who got pissed off about the late fees they got from returning movies late back to Blockbuster. And so Netflix started off as a mail-in. You ordered them through the mail. They would send them to your house. You would watch them, and then you would mail them back when you were done. And when this was a fledgling, when Netflix was a fledgling, they were actually in pretty serious talks with Blockbuster for Blockbuster to purchase Netflix. Now, if you looked at these two companies in, say, the late 90s, no one, and I mean no one, would have bet that Netflix was going to morph into what it was and that Blockbuster would go bankrupt. Save, I think they've got one store somewhere in Oregon, if I remember right, that's kind of a nostalgic store that somebody keeps open. I don't know exactly how it works, but I mean, you're talking about a place that had thousands and thousands of locations across the country that's actually no longer in existence. And Netflix has grown into this media giant that provides home streaming services. They create their own movies. They create their own television shows. And Blockbuster is in Jurassic Park. So there's a situation where you'd look and say, hey, the dominant market player, they're going to keep killing the market. They're going to keep doing what they're doing. And no one's going to take them out. No one's going to replace them as the go-to solution for home entertainment. But that's exactly what Netflix did. So the lesson there is market dominance does not guarantee long-term success. At one point, the following companies were the largest companies in the country. Sears was at one point the largest company in the country. Standard Oil at one point was the largest company in the country. A&P, believe it or not, at one point was the largest company in the country. And all of those have gone by the wayside, have been replaced by other competitors. So simply because you dominate the market and you've grown into this gigantic company, think about the companies that are out there now, an Apple or an Amazon or Microsoft. At some point, those companies will fail, because at some point, every company fails. So there's no guarantee that things are going to continue on the path that they're on. No matter how big you are, no matter what a strong position you hold, at some point, the music stops. No guarantees. Let's keep that in mind. Second example is sports related, and we can sprinkle a couple of other sports examples in here as well, because we're sports fans. But our next example is Tom Brady, his draft story. So pretty famous now for anyone that follows football or knows football. Tom Brady was the 199th pick in the 2000 NFL draft. So that means every team, he was a 6th round pick. That means every team passed him over multiple times, including the Patriots, where he wound up creating his Hall of Fame career. There was nobody excited about Tom Brady. Go back even further, he didn't really play in high school until his senior year. And coming out of high school, he had exactly one Division I scholarship offer to the University of Michigan. So he takes that, goes to the University of Michigan. He's like 7th on the depth chart there, and he keeps working his way up. Even into his senior year, he was splitting time with a phenom prospect named Drew Henson. So even in his senior year, it took him the first part of the season to establish himself as the starter. So he does well at Michigan. He winds up sneaking into the very end of the draft, 199th pick. And he's the third. In fact, I think he started off as the 4th quarterback and worked his way up to the 3rd quarterback on the Patriots. And for some reason, they kept 3 quarterbacks. And the teams don't usually keep three quarterbacks on their active roster. But for whatever reason, his first year, the Patriots did. And so he wound up working his way up, excuse me, to the number 2 spot. And the guy that was their starter was a former number 1 draft pick. Drew Bledsoe out of Washington State was a former number 1 draft pick. And he was the starting quarterback. Well, he got hit in a Jets game, and it actually ruptured an artery in his chest. And he had to be rushed to the hospital and have literally life-saving surgery after this hit happened. So Brady got into that game. And then obviously that's not a 3-day recovery when they have to stitch one of your arteries back together. And so Bledsoe was out for about 6 weeks. And in that period, Brady played well enough that his coach, Bill Belichick, said, you know what? I don't want to upset the apple cart. We're actually on a good path here. I know Bledsoe is former number 1 pick, and he was our starter, but I'm going to stick with Brady for now. And things kind of happened, and a lot of it was from Tom Brady's hard work and putting himself in a position to be successful when he got the chance to be successful. So the lesson there is you got to persevere, you got to fight through, and you can't think about what if Bill Belichick had said, you know what, I'm going to cave into pressure. I've got this 6th round pick that nobody knows, and I've got a former number 1 draft pick, not number 1, not 1st round draft pick, the first pick in the draft, the first pick that anyone could take. They took Drew Bledsoe. And Belichick sat him even after the injury and said, you know what, I'm running with Brady. So you can't judge that what's happened in the past as a predictor of what's going to happen in the future. It doesn't work because things change, and sometimes people step up when they get opportunities. Sometimes people fall off when things have been going really well, and you just don't know. You just don't know. Again, no guarantees in life. So example 3, the 2008 housing market collapse. So home prices had really since 2001, there was a little dip in 2001. There was a dot-com recession in 2001. but they'd been climbing steadily and quickly since 2001. And then 2008 rolls around, and what had been happening was banks had been issuing pretty risky loans. So they stopped doing a lot of the due diligence in an effort to create as many mortgages as they could so they could collect the fees on those mortgages. They were issuing really risky mortgages. And so with the number of people that had adjustable rate mortgages as interest rates went up and as the housing market cooled, they were not able to refinance to put themselves in a position to keep up with their payments. And so a lot of people defaulted on their loans at the same time, which happened in 2008 in conjunction with, and one of the main causes of, the global economy collapse slash recession, depression, whatever you want to call the 2008 events. So it seemed like if you were in the real estate market during that time, it seemed like the party would go on forever. It seemed like home prices would continue to rise, that only appreciation would happen. You'd always be able to refinance. Your house would always be worth more next year than it was this year. And it cost a lot of people a lot of things. It ruined a lot of people's lives. A lot of loans were defaulted. Banks lost a ton of money. Yes, the American public bailed them out through TARP funding and other government programs. But it's a good example of, it looked like you couldn't lose. It looked like all you had to do was buy real estate and it was going to appreciate. So if you bought it, you were going to make money simply by owning it because the market was going to continue going up forever. So it looked like a sure bet. There is no such thing as a sure bet. There's no guarantees. You're not guaranteed to make money when you invest. And that's just another example of, you don't know what's going to happen. It's hard to predict the future. Number 4 is the Titanic. So the Titanic, with the unsinkable Titanic, right? So they had re-engineered this boat so that the watertight compartments were such that even if 2 or 3 of them were breached, that the boat could stay afloat because they had engineered it so well. It was so well constructed and so well engineered that it was unsinkable. So talk about the kiss of death. Literally on its maiden voyage from Liverpool, England to New York, it sank. Hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank. We all know the story. We all know how that goes. Many of us have seen the movie. By the way, I don't understand why that movie was such a big deal. Nothing wrong with it, but the way people talked about it, for those of us that remember when it was in theaters, holy cow, they lost their minds over that movie. Not a bad movie, not saying that. I just didn't get all the hubbub about it. So that was a situation where people became overconfident. You know, they launched the Titanic with the lifeboat capacity of less than half of the people on board. So they had about 1,500 people on board. They had about 750 seats on lifeboats because they were so confident. What do we need the lifeboats for? It's not going to crash. It's not going to sink. Like, it can't. We've engineered it so perfectly, it's impervious. Well, now it sits at the bottom of the North Atlantic. So that's a good example of people trusting innovation too much, or trusting what people tell them too much and winding up in bad situations. So that is our next example. And our final example is actually the COVID-19 pandemic. So when you think about, at least from a U.S. perspective, the economy's going good, unemployment's at an all-time low. I shouldn't say all-time, it's at a historic low. And kind of everyone is doing well. The tax cuts had been passed. People had more money in their pocket. Groceries were affordable. Everybody was in a pretty good spot. I shouldn't say everybody, but the majority of people were in a really good spot. People were generally really pleased with the way things were going. And then we get this news that there's this pandemic that's coming. And leave all the arguments aside, we feel very strongly that there was a gross overreaction to the pandemic, and that a lot of the things that were forced upon us by government leaders and government agencies were not only unconstitutional, but entirely unnecessary as well. So it's a much better path to kind of individually target responses to things versus painting with a broad brush. For example, if you were under the age of 50 and didn't have comorbidities like hypertension, like obesity, like diabetes, things that made you prone to be more susceptible to adverse reactions to respiratory diseases, you had almost no risk of dying of COVID. Almost no risk. You can go back and look at the data. You can go back and look at the statistics. of who actually passed away from COVID. And it was almost nobody in that group. It was typically older people or people that were already unhealthy that caught COVID, and COVID kind of pushed them over the edge to where they couldn't recover. And the whole point of this is not to debate COVID or the actions that were taken during COVID or anything related to COVID. The point is nobody saw it coming. We all were surprised when it happened, and the world changed kind of overnight. And you can't predict how those things work. You can be humming along and you can have an event happen in your life that turns your own personal world upside down. That event happened to turn the entire world upside down. And you don't know what's going to come. There's no guarantees. If you might have had a really successful restaurant and you're humming along, and then the COVID pandemic happened, and all of a sudden you got a big problem. And there was no way for you to know about it. There was no way for you to plan for it. You just had to deal with it as it came your way. So again, no guarantees in life. So, on the sports things, we think about things like the 1986 Mets in Game 6 of the World Series. So the Mets were a can't-miss team. They had won a bunch of games that year. They had a ton of talent, and everyone expected them to win the World Series, which they actually did. But in Game 6, they were down to the Boston Red Sox by 2 runs in the bottom of the 10th inning. They were 1 strike away from the World Series ending on 3 consecutive at-bats. And they got 3 hits and a wild pitch, and they scored 3 runs to win that game, went on to win Game 7. And it looked like they were cooked. Everybody thought the Red Sox had won that game. There was nobody on base. There was 2 outs. There was 2 strikes. 1 more strike, the game is over. And the Mets get 3 hits in a row, a wild pitch from Bob Stanley. Mookie Wilson hits that grounder up first base. It gets through Buckner, and the rest is history. So you don't know what's going to happen. You just don't know how things are going to work. There was, a football playoff game between the Vikings and the Saints a couple years ago, and the Vikings had a chance for one last play. They were down by, I want to say 4, I don't know. They needed a touchdown. They were 65, 70 yards away. So quarterback throws a pass. The defensive back inexplicably runs through the receiver. Instead of trying to just tackle the receiver, he runs through him, past him, and knocks down the other player that had a chance to tackle him. The receiver, Stephon Diggs, catches the ball, runs the end zone, game over. It looked like the Vikings were cooked. You don't know. There's no guarantees. I know Saints fans remember that game because it was brutal. But the whole point here is there's no guarantees in life. So if you're sitting around waiting for a guarantee to take action, you're going to be sitting there for the rest of your life. There are no guarantees. So you have to gather as much information as you can. You have to put the best plan together that you can. And then we would argue the best thing you can do is take some action. You don't have to take gigantic actions. You don't have to take a huge amount of risk. But if you just sit there waiting for a guarantee, life is going to pass you by because there's no guarantees in life. You've got to take your shots, whether it's talking to the person that you're attracted to, whether it's talking to your boss about a raise or a promotion or additional responsibilities, whether it's changing jobs, whether it's moving to a new city. Doesn't matter what it is. Whatever's important to you, you've got to take your shots. And you can't sit and wait for a guarantee because it's not coming. It does not exist in life. And anytime someone tells you something is guaranteed, that should make you really concerned because nobody can guarantee anything. Life is difficult. Life is unpredictable. And anyone who says they can guarantee it probably should not be trusted. So that's the episode for today, guys. Hope you find that helpful. Keep it in your mind. If you have examples that have happened in your life, I can tell you we have done that, from a real estate investment perspective. That's the easiest way to illustrate it. We have done deals where we're like, man, we bought this so good we can't miss. And we missed. And we've done deals where we were like, I don't know, this might work, it might not. And those were home runs. Now, there's been all sorts of things in between, and we've done a lot of real estate transactions and real estate investment. One thing I can tell you is there is no guarantee. You don't know exactly how it's going to play out. So you're best off being conservative in your underwriting and your estimates and leaving yourself the wiggle room to absorb the inevitable problems that pop up in every real estate deal or real estate transaction. So James puts it up over here every day. Don't forget to go to our website. Don't forget to go to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. We've got links to all of our social media accounts there. We've also got a newsletter that we publish every weekday that you can subscribe to there as well. It'd be great if you could like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you consume it on. It's super helpful to get the podcast out to more people. and we sure appreciate the support. So happy New Year to everybody. This is our first episode after the New Year. It'll air on Thursday after the New Year, and we appreciate the support. Everybody have a great year. Hit the ground running for 2025, and we will see you next time.